Hey, good afternoon, John Darby. It's a great day here in Wanaka and to be in front of the Te Ari Wanaka walkway, and just like to introduce you. First off, I'm Garth Falconer from the Reset Urban Design. We've been assisting the QLDC with the development of the Lakefront development plan. But just going back a little bit, I want to talk about how this boardwalk came into being and that, and just perhaps introducing yourself. You're a retired zoologist and ornithologist from Dunedin originally.
Yes, indeed.
And you had a specialty in animal behaviour, and I think that's key to your interest here. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. I've animal behaviour as a special field is not very common, but I think that just sitting down and watching animals for hours and hours and hours on end gives you a better understanding of them. In fact, the very first season, way back now, 2013, when I first started getting interested in this particular species of bird, I went over to Lake Hayes every week for the whole of the breeding season and sat in a kayak and worked out what these birds do, why they do what they do, and how they do it. And then sort of came back with a dream, if you like.
And we're talking about the grebes.
We're talking about the grebes, the southern crested grebe.
A threatened species.
A threatened species, rare and threatened species. It's extinct in the North Island. And it was actually, it still is possibly declining from north to south in the South Island. So it seemed to me that a bird certainly worthwhile investing in, because it's a very beautiful one. And of course the crazy thing, even as a zoologist, I'd only ever seen one of these things in the whole of my life. That's a live bird.
Wow.
Working in a museum, I saw lots of dead ones. But I saw a live one actually in Otago Harbour, and that really sort of intrigued me, because it was in a saline environment, and I always thought these things lived in fresh water. But they're primarily freshwater birds, and when they're really desperate, they'll go saltwater. And to me, the physiology of that was interesting. But anyway.
And there was a little colony at Lake Hayes at that stage.
Yeah, it wasn't a little one. It was actually quite a big one, and not at all well understood. Sorry, and yeah, it's sort of really quite complicated. But certainly there was enough information and watching the behaviour, looking at their timing and so forth, that I thought that we could do things over here. So we actually started, and from the Wanaka point of view, it started with a single pair of birds attempting to nest just down here in Roy's Bay.
So they were already here, but just one pair?
Just one pair, that was it. And I found out that they tried to nest in the 2 previous years, and they kept failing.
And it was just down here?
Just down here,
by the marina?
By the marina,
with the boats and moored?
And all, everything, And so I thought, you know, I wonder whether we can do something about this. And so it started from there, just a single pair. And it's really been quite amazing, actually, what's happened.
And so the single pair had trouble creating a nest with all the human activity going on and the modification of the lakefront and all that. And so you sort of like designed this strategy to give them a nesting spot and sort of grow the colony.
Well, they're slightly crazy birds, because firstly they can barely walk. And because they can barely walk at all, is that as sort of running away from anything, it just doesn't happen.
They've got a web foot.
They've got web feet, but they just fall over. Their legs are way back, and they just cannot really seriously walk. And also they can fly, but they only fly at night.
They're not good flies?
Not good flies, no. And no, we've picked them up in all sorts of different places, to halfway up Mount Iron, and Mitre 10 building and things like that. So that was one of the issues. Firstly, and then looking at why there is such a high failure rate, and why they are rare, and why they're there. So we've deliberately or inadvertently destroyed a great deal of their habitat. And part of what we're doing here is trying to recreate that habitat with the planting out around the boardwalk itself. So if we take it from where we started to where we are now, we've now fledged over 400 chicks.
Okay, John, so just going back 10 years ago to that kind of original problem you were facing, you only had one pair of grebes. They were struggling to find a nest that was free of predators and to establish themselves. How did you go about solving the problem?
Well, first I needed to find some more grebes, or find some grebes, because I had no idea what their breeding strategy was. So I actually put a letter in the local paper and got lots of answers, and Lake Hayes was one area that came up more than once, and they had quite a lot of grebes on Lake Hayes. So basically I went over there. I'm a kayaker by a trade, if you like, or a hobby. And for the whole of the breeding season over there, it's nearly 3 months, I went there every week, sat in a kayaked Lake Hayes, and at the end of it came away with a think, I know what we can do. And so it was understanding that they're very, very vulnerable when they're trying to breed, simply because they can't walk.
You really studied their behaviours.
Oh yes, I was looking at their behaviour. I was trying to look at watching them in terms of what they do, why they do, and how they do it. What's going to make a really successful grebe breeding program, if you like. As I say, I spent a lot of time over there, made a lot of notes, and then came back and decided that if we could actually have a guaranteed nest that did not sink, or whatever it was, whenever the water levels changed, we could do something about it.
There's a lot of fluctuations.
There's a huge lot of fluctuations. And in fact, to give you an idea, if you compare the water level in here today, 2 years ago, I was kayaking over the top rail of the Marina Bridge. And have a look at, that's over 3.5 meters high now at the moment. So anyway, so that's an aside, but that's what they cannot nest in that sort of environment, and or they cannot succeed in it. They will try, but they will fail.
So we're talking about a nest that's detached from the land.
It's usually underneath willows is a favoured area, under shade, and that also provides fallen logs and debris underneath the trees that they can actually attach the nest to. But there's a limit as to how well they can attach that nest, and mostly it's not at all very well. So the thinking was, if we could provide a platform, a floating nest for them, this might solve part of the problem. And it was really quite interesting. I was amazed myself. So the big thing is, it's all very well to create a platform, but you've then got to get the birds to use it. And what I did was to use a concept within behavioural ecology, if you like, was to use what we call the supernormal stimulus. And in this instance, this is a case of where an organism will react to a stimulus, which is in fact greater than normal, and accordingly, which is basically what they did. So what it was building a platform, and then building the best grebe nest you could ever see, or the grebes could ever see. And
this is your design.
It was absolutely astonishing, because actually I was so embarrassed with the first one that I did. I towed it out to the marina at 9 o'clock one night, and it really looked like a dump on a pallet. Really, it was that primitive. And tied it underneath the boardwalk, the little bridge on the marina. And came out 6 o'clock the following morning, and there were a pair of grebes absolutely frantically building and improving already, within a matter of hours. And so that really set it off, and it was absolutely amazing. So
you refined the design down a bit from
yes,
that
prototype? It's changed a lot. So the flotation, and originally we had little 4-litre carboys, and then we had bigger, different flotation. Then we went to pool noodles, which were very appropriate, and there's a lot of those underneath, and there's a lot of design issues, because it has to be at the right level of the water so that the birds can get out of the water, hop onto it, and also withstands wind and storms and heavy and big changes in the lake levels.
But I mean, Wanaka's known for its windy conditions often.
Very windy.
So you needed to create a sort of like an upright.
So they were all designs that we had to work to, and we still wouldn't argue that we've got it perfect. But we, as I say, we've now managed to fledge over 400 chicks, and the highest number of attempts to breed in any one season at the moment is 47. That's just around on here. I think this season, which is not finished yet, is probably going to be greater because they started some 2 months earlier than what they normally do. So they put them into a very safe environment, which is their nest site offshore. Then, you know, they're perfect. They're almost fearless. In fact, when we're checking nests, I think mine one would be unique. I'm sorry, this is perhaps an aside. No. But very recently, I was referred to ACC because when I'm approaching the birds to check the nests and what's going on, they have, like throwing javelins at you, they have got very, very sharp beaks.
They're quite territorial, aren't they?
Very territorial and very defensive. Most of them won't get off the nest, and I often have to put my hand underneath them to see how many eggs they've got. And the last one I did actually went into my thumb joint,
hence the
and well, this is for another reason, and became infected. And so I had to go see the doctor about it. And so basically ACC found themselves funding the treatment of somebody who got their hand pecked by a grebe. That might be the first one in the world, I don't know. But anyway, so they're very, very defensive and totally different behaviour once they're offshore onto those nest platforms. And so we check the nest simply because we also run a grebe diary for people. It's published most week, and
monitoring them.
Yeah, what we're doing and when they're about to hatch. So to know when they're going to hatch, we need to know when they were laid, and we can then calculate that, and we just lead them to it from there on.
So year on year, you've seen an increase in the number of nesting pairs, and also the productivity, the number of eggs they're laying.
Yes, it varies, but I think on average we're producing chicks at a better rate than the best natural environment in the country.
So this is an environment that's modified, it's designed, but it's actually working in terms of increasing the numbers of this threatened species.
It does work has worked very, very well. But on top of that, I've used it as a way of communicating with the public about what we're doing. So we're telling them in detail about this conservation program, but the public are also seeing it. And this boardwalk, to me, just absolutely sealed it, because I've often sort of wondered, I mean, the birds started to breed 2 months earlier this year than they'd previously done, right in the middle of all of the work that was going on here in terms of the construction work. And the contractors, I think, were absolutely fantastic. I mean, they seem to feel that this was a very special experience for them as well. But yeah, they were just absolutely amazing. So it was not a problem, and that's what we've found out really, is that if you can put the birds, these animals, in an environment in which they feel they're secure, then it's okay. There's no problems at all.
So I guess it comes back to when we first met back in 2015. Prior to that, John, I don't think I'd actually noticed any grebes, and I honestly didn't know what a grebe was. And after meeting you and talking about your program and your strategy, went down, and I was just amazed at these birds. And I was also amazed that they were indigenous birds and that they were threatened, because they're a beautiful looking bird, I think. And you know, and how they couple up and how they share time on the nest, and they build this lovely little home. It seemed like a wonderful story of not only just rehabilitating but regenerating a species. It was a really good news story, and I think, you know, we talked about the idea of getting the public, you know, with the development of the lakefront and the access of the lakefront, of getting people down off that skinny bank, down, you know, maybe via a boardwalk to get people down there. And I guess we were a little bit worried that perhaps that the activity of people being close to the nests would upset the the nesting of the grebes, but that didn't happen, did it?
No, it really hasn't. It can happen in extreme circumstances, but mostly it doesn't. And the data that we've now collected would show that they're an incredibly tolerant species.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the studies had been done from the land, and I think that was one of the big perceptions that why this is such a scary and difficult animal to work with. Once you do take your study from the land onto the water, which is, we've used kayaks for nearly 95% of everything we do.
Right.
It's a huge difference. You're dealing with a totally different animal. And that's what I picked up at Lake Hayes to start with, that we could do that.
So you're actually out there on the water with
Out
them.
on the water. Well, they, instead of sort of moving away from me in a kayak, they would come. They were curious. They wanted to find out who this was, what this was, and what it did. And I was getting literally a metre or so away from a grebe, when I'd been led to believe from the literature you wouldn't get within 10 metres of them. And so it's changed. And coming into the boardwalk, I think it actually has been an incredibly exciting part of the exercise, because you really almost should be talking to the public, because it might take us an hour or more to just walk along the boardwalk to do a check, because we're stopped so often and there's just so many people asking questions, and all of them are just say, this is just wonderful, this is so special, and this is, we come here every day, and so forth. And it's very different.
And we see people stopping there and just spending 10, 20, 30 minutes just watching.
Absolutely.
Because they're always active, aren't they?
They're always active. And when you talked about the behaviour, the collective noun for these things is a dance of grebes. A dance of grebes, and which is such an appropriate thing, because it's all part of the courtship of the animal. And it is. It's very beautiful, and it's much more intense at the beginning of the season, and that's the best time. But at the moment, we don't know when the beginning of the season is, because the literature will tell you that they will start to breed from basically November to January is the peak time.
Right.
We've actually had them, the earliest one was on June the 6th. The next earliest was on June the 21st, Midwinter's Day. Right. And I have a photograph of a bird and a platform covered in snow. So you're not supposed to do that, but they do.
What do they do in the winter time?
They migrate, and we don't know where they go, because one of their problems is that they fly at night.
And they're not good flyers.
They're not good flyers,
so they're not going to Siberia or something, are they?
Well, no, they're not. They're not going offshore. No, they're not going offshore. One of the snags is that we can't mark these birds.
Can't tag them or
no. Well, the big thing is that we normally would tag them on their legs, right? But their legs are underwater all the time, so we can't get to them. And work that I've done with penguins, we can put devices on the backs of these birds, and they're amazing because they communicate with satellite networks. But the other strange thing about they really are really quite extraordinary, is that within an hour, so the eggs hatch at 1 to 2 day intervals, but within an hour of the first egg hatching, the chick crawls onto the back of the adult, and it's nurtured there from there on. All other species of birds I know of nurture their chicks underneath them. Grebes do it on their back.
Because they're on the water?
Well, it's part of their escape. I interpret it as this, that the one time that we try to avoid approaching these nests, and why it's important to know is when they're hatching, is that when they're actually hatching. So they operate on, we'll take what we've got because of the risk. So if you approach the nest during the hatching period, it's likely that the bird will get off, and most of them will get off, and it will take whatever chicks it's got with it and leave all the rest of the eggs on the nest. So it's cutting your losses, so to speak. It's decided that it's but one of the behaviors of the birds 2 to 3 days before the chicks hatch is that they stand up in the nest and they shake themselves. And what they're doing is shaking their chicks off their backs, or this is a practice run, so to speak, an innate behavior. And so that's really is a very good indicator. So if you see a bird standing on its thing, shaking itself, it's either got chicks or about to hatch them.
Right.
The chicks are very voluble, they're very noisy inside the egg, and they start peeping 2 to 3 days before they actually hatch.
Right.
But it's this unique behavior of them breaking out of the egg.
How long would they be on the parent's back for?
Well, it's usually, well, up to 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, if we but depends how many chicks they've got. But it's unique and
that's
special.
That's a long time, 2 to
It
3
is.
weeks.
But the big thing is about it, what's unique about it, is it's the only bird that I know that can actually physically take its chicks to safety if they're threatened.
Right.
And that to me is really quite amazing. So one of the extraordinary things about watching them, and we'll see them maybe later on down there, is these little heads that pop out of the back of the bird.
Right.
But it's one of the reasons why we can't put devices on their backs, because they're going to spend all day trying to shake it off.
Yes.
So it's one of the, that's what makes it a little bit more difficult than usual.
Well, it's a very complex bird, isn't
Oh,
it?
it's the most complex bird I've worked with, that's for sure. And I've worked with penguins all over the world. And
Quite fascinating. And the other aspect, I guess, just increasing our understanding and our appreciation of these amazing birds is that you're developing an education program around this.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you're working with Marcus at the primary school and that, and others and that. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes. Well, we've actually we've got both schools. The high school working with them as well, Mount Aspiring College, and they have been building some of the platforms for us. The next lot of platforms that are going to go out are going to be painted with scenes of the natural history of Lake Wanaka.
Right.
That's all going to be done by children, and it's part of the education. But every year I'm talk to hundreds of kids one way or another, as does Marcus, and we've involved with them. We have a group that meets here on Sunday mornings with children who come out with us in the kayaks.
Right.
And as much as anything enjoy the swim afterwards, but it's all their water fights and so forth. But it's involving the children is a very, very important part of what we do. And they are becoming passionate, and it's all about, because they're the ones who are going to have to look after this lake, and it seriously does need looking after. So I love it that I get told off from time to time from people on the boardwalk. Just leave the grebes alone, don't interfere with them, and so we just have to paddle over there and explain what we're doing. But yes, it's a big change and a big feature for Wanaka.
I guess the other thing, as well as educating the next generation of ecologists, is just the broader public, who might not know anything about the grebes or how complex this lake edge is in Roy's Bay and Wanaka. So how we, there's some signage there. I think you've added some signage.
Yeah, we've added a bit of signage. It might be slightly illegal at this stage, but it's the process of communication. We could do all of this and not communicate, and I think it would be wasted. And how we communicate is a very, very important part of the success of this whole program. I would say 95% of all the children in Wanaka know what a grebe is. Go out of Wanaka and and that's understandable in that sense, but it's now part of the natural history of Wanaka, and one that the children are passionate about and they love. And so it's a very important part of what we do.
And I think it's getting embraced by the broader population
of
Wanaka.
There's no doubt about that.
And I understand too, John, that you're also involved going back to Lake Hayes when there was I think there was a development proposal that might have threatened the...
Yes, I'm still in contact with them because I think we need to get that broader understanding. And, it might be a side, but a lot of introduced trees have been demonized in the sense that and call them weeds, and that provides a good excuse for them to be chopped down. So one of them that really concerns me are willows. Willows are a very, very important part of the ecosystem. And for instance, at Lake Hayes, there's at least three, possibly four rare and threatened species have become established in that sort of ecosystem
Around the
and
willow
it's
trees.
around the lake,
Yeah.
and it's dominated by willow,
Yes,
and that's why these birds are there.
yes,
And you know, unfortunately, a lot of it is being demolished,
yeah,
to me, it's just so sad because I think it's very, very special.
yeah.
And-
And we're talking, I guess, in terms of design, the attributes of the willow is its overhanging branches, the way the roots and the trunk gets close to the
Yeah,
water
yeah.
edge, it provides that interface.
And
doesn't
it provides that shade, and it provides the anchoring point,
Yeah,
and what the birds perceive as security.
right,
And so, yeah, there's
Awesome.
actually a big population there,
right.
but it's going to decline and become very, very vulnerable. Now, having said all that, with Lake Hayes are now starting to do some planting, mostly using natives,
Yeah,
and more importantly, starting a trapping program.
yeah,
And it really is astonishing the number of predators that they've taken out of the system.
we're getting right down on the lake edge.
Getting right down on the lake edge and trapping.
Wow.
So yeah, it's absolutely amazing and how successful that program has been.
So John, the boardwalk's working in terms of the Grebes, and how do you see it fitting in with the regeneration of the lake's ecology?
I think it's one of the most important developments that has happened positively towards the lakefront and its development. Simply because, for a number of reasons, it's a two-way sort of communication process. Firstly, we're informing the public that it wasn't always like what we've got. The biggest single loss or reason for the loss of habitat in terms of freshwater ecosystem, we've lost over 90% in the whole of New Zealand.
Yes.
And most of that loss is due to what we have done to it by way of destroying, converting it to farmland, providing better views of lakes and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So what we've done here is to make a very positive statement about the values that are really very important to all
In the middle of a marina.
In the middle of a marina, it can work. And this is one of the success, I think, is that we've got if you like, an industry, commercial industry,
The marina,
operating successfully alongside a conservation program.
Side by side.
And side by side, and that's actually been very special and wonderful. Taken a while to get everybody on board, but they are there now, and it's making a difference.
Yeah. And the marina owners are some of your biggest supporters now, aren't
Yes, they are. Yes, it's wonderful actually. Yeah, it's very special, and actually some of them are. There was one person, I must tell you, it is a little story sideline, but he's from Auckland and he's got one of the berths here.
Yeah.
And every time he came down during the summer, or when he came down the first time in the summer, he invited his friends on his boat to have lunch, because right next, a metre away from the boat, was a grebe sitting on a nest with its eggs. And that was his special treat for these
That was
people.
a central attraction.
Yeah, that was one of the things that he did, and it is really just absolutely amazing.
Right. So you see this, what started off with a single pair of nesting grebes as being part of perhaps a larger picture to regenerate the lake edge of Wanaka.
Yes, absolutely. If we can look after the ecology of the lake, then we're looking after the lake itself, and that is so important. And one of the big things is I've been coming down here for nearly 10 years, watching the number and variety of birds that come. But once we get this ecosystem developed, it's going to expand. We're going to get white-faced herons and all of these sorts of birds.
Snowball.
It will happen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not just in Wanaka. You're actually taking this program, this strategy, this design elsewhere.
Yeah, it's gone. I had not anticipated that there would be such a wide interest, but we've got platforms on Lake Tiano, we have them at Glenorchy, we have them over on the west coast, we have them at Ohau,
Right.
and obviously Lake Hawea. So yeah, they've
And
fragmented.
the local community involved
Yes,
they have
very
got
much,
involved,
yeah. And Lake Hawea is the one that's just absolutely amazing in terms of, there's a huge team, there's a Grebe team, they've set up
Yeah.
a website
Yeah.
over there, and they're followed with a great deal of enthusiasm and interest. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
It's such a good story, John. I mean, when we first started looking at this program, you know, to extend the redevelopment of the lakefront along Roy's Bay, you know, right from McDougall Street right through to the marina, I think a lot of people's expectations were limited to maybe we're going to put in a wider promenade and some seating and plant some new trees. But there's a much bigger story.
It is, and I think it's being very much appreciated. I think really it would be, you need to be the sort of the ears on the boardwalk to hear the wonderful things that people say and how much it means to them. Yeah.
It must give you a great deal of
Well,
satisfaction.
it is. It is nice. Yeah, it is cool, and they're lovely, and it's special. The locals have bought into it by and large, and this is what is good.
They're really, it's a treasure, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
You've really given us a treasure.
Yeah, and I think one of the lovely parts every now and again, I'm out there with Marcus, and you'll hear a little voice, obviously of a child, to say, "Oh, there's Marcus down there. That's John Darby." You know, and this is a conversation going on 100 metres away from you with these kids.
Because they've met you before, and they'll keep coming down here and they'll see you.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is, you know, committing ourselves to working with children. And we do. We have I'm shortly going to send out a list of the emails of all the children who contact me and say, "Can I come out with you? Can I do this? Can I do that?" and so forth. And so that we've got the team that's coming through now that will continue that program.
So this is a community building program as much as it is an ecology regeneration program, isn't it?
I think it is. Yes, absolutely. Yes, so definitely the community are bought into it, and that's special. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your time, and
well, thank you for your work, because this is how it has worked. This has been this interface, how we can actually join the two up and make it work. And it has. It really has worked wonderfully.
Well, it takes a team, though. You know,
yes, absolutely.
We got the councillors, Wanaka Community Board have been right behind this right from the start. We've got ecologists, engineers, and the people that built the boardwalk. They really brought into it too.
Yeah, well, they did. Do you know that they made and donated 10 platforms? Did you know that?
No. I
yes,
didn't.
At the end of it.
That was Blakely Construction.
That's Blakely Construction, made 10 of these platforms. And I can tell you roughly, I know what that would have cost, and it was well over $5,000 to do that. And they're beautifully made, professionally made. Yeah, so yes.
Gosh. Each year these nests are getting better and better.
Yeah, well, they are, and they work. I mean, we're still refining them.
Yeah.
But when they did that was just so special. I mean, but right through the whole thing, I think these people, and certainly Dan
Williams.
Dan. I think they just loved it, and actually when they would see me struggling with a platform, Dan would get one of the guys to come out and help me to move it or do this or whatever it was. Yeah, they just bought into it totally. And the big thing is, right the way, you know, they talked to us right the way through this whole process. Is this going to be a problem? Is that going to be a problem? Can we do this? Can we do that? All the way through. It was just wonderful.
And so we had like minimal disruption. You actually had a record breeding season.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So fantastic.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's all looking good for the future.
It is a lot of work for the future, but it's looking very good. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, John.
It is special.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.